It's time, boys. I've just installed Le Mans Ultimate for the first time in my PC in 2026. Yes, it took me quite a while to get to this title. Sometimes real life catches up, you are busy or distracted with your girlfriend and you are not sim racing as much. I have some very interesting first impressions from this title that I want to share with you guys. First off, the greeting menu and the creation of your account feels very professional, and all the menus and the presentation is very good. If you have ever went to a Le Mans race or an European Le Mans series race like I have, because I live close to the racetrack of Portimão or Autódromo Internacional do Algarve, you will notice that the themes, the color schemes and the artwork in the game fits the themes from the real life event. The contrasts, the neutral tones and the readability and easiness on the eyes is very nice. There is some special attention to detail and care about the user experience right now. I'm not sure if this was always like this, but right now in 2026 this is my first impression of it. I think the Le Mans styling and unique character fits nicely without becoming too overwhelming. It has its own quirks about navigation and its own unique style without straying too far away from most racing games, especially nowadays. Not the games, but in racing simulators everyone is going towards the same style of look and the same approaches. Even the heads-up displays usually end up having the same information in the same spots, which is very consistent and I like it a lot. The setup menu for the car, for example, is not as intuitive as I would like. The old Assetto Corsa seems to have the most intuitive setup system of them all, and the page reminds me a little bit of Automobilista 2. AMS 2 also has this page system where things are a little bit better spread out and more organized. Here, due to the nature of the fuel calculations and the fuel ratio, sometimes it's a little bit of trial and error to figure out how much fuel and how much energy I want, and especially if I'm driving in the middle of a stint, I cannot imagine how will I figure out how much do I really need. For example, in the old Assetto Corsa or AMS2, it's much easier for me to do a pit stop and manage the pit stop strategy in the middle of the race and just change the values and look at how many laps those values are supposed to give me. At the same time, I've noticed especially in AMS2 that many times the laps that it is calculating are wrong, and many times I'm a few liters of fuel short, sometimes up to 2-3 laps shorter of how much I needed. And here in Le Mans Ultimate usually the calculations are pretty spot on. What I see on the display, at least for the GT3 cars, it's very close to what I will get in the real performance. The graphics and optimization seem to be quite the step from R Factor 2 in my opinion. It's nothing too bad. It kinda looks like a better old Assetto Corsa, but in the same vibe regarding photorealism. The graphics on the track objects, the 3D effect on the trees, like the way everything feels, it looks very nice in my opinion. At least it's not like the craziest graphics like from the craziest latest game engine. I'm also running modest settings for better performance, so it could look even better, and you notice some flickering in the shadow. I've even seen people that completely turn the shadows off, which for me makes everything look so weird because it feels like the cars are floating across the track. But right now the experience for me has been of a smooth running performance, no big FPS drops, nothing too crazy going on. I recognize that some other games with their best settings can even look better than this, of course. Assetto Corsa with the best paid graphic mods can be also very impressive, and those things can be very hard to beat. And of course, just my luck on my first ever online race in Le Mans Ultimate, I found that there were daily races happening in the Portimão racetrack, which is one of my favorite and one that I dearly miss in some other games like Automobilista 2, and that I also missed on the original Assetto Corsa. And even though you have to get it with mods, sometimes you're not sure how much do you trust every mod and all the track details, but here track is very well detailed. Every single bump, everything feels very realistic and spot on. I've actually done a track wall in the first sector of this track, and I've been around this track. I have pictures here, and so the track track feels very well done in Le Mans Ultimate and very accurate to the real-life counterpart. I personally know the geometry of these curbs. I've walked on top of them, I have pictures on them, I have been on this tower, I have been sitting here on the right side on the benches where the spectators sit, both the ones to the right side and the ones in front, and so on that corner I know very well the geometry. I've been there more than 20 times over the past 4 years, and this is a testament for Le Mans Ultimate, where they focus on having way less content but on providing way higher quality of the content with a way more focused approach, like Assetto Corsa Competition when it was originally released. But Le Mans Ultimate has quite a little bit of variety in the car roster and the real-life counterpart of the racing series, and it does provide a little bit of variety and at the same time completely different driving experiences, because I tried the LMP2 car as well and it felt totally different to the GT3s, and even the GT3 cars between them, they feel very different from each other while driving. And another interesting thing is that the cars can feel so different, and this kind of force feedback is not the most communicative, it's not the most lively force feedback that you will feel. For me, the original Assetto Corsa, when it's modded by Content Manager and you have the best settings for the force feedback, is the game that feels the closest to driving a real car regarding the force feedback feeling. It's not that the steering wheel feels realistic in the same way it would feel in the real car, but the way the force feedback makes you feel when everything is properly configured regarding the FOV, the whole game, and you have a good car in track, it gives you the closest feeling to sitting inside the car and driving that car to the limit. But the cars here for me do feel a little bit planted, especially under braking, and I can even turn in while holding the brakes quite a bit. And of course with the ABS on the LMGT3 cars, I can also be a little bit hard on the brake in a way that's not as acceptable for the LMP2 cars, for example. Driving here reminds me a little bit of Assetto Corsa Competizione regarding the slip angle and all that stuff, but the cars do feel a little bit stiff or understeer, but maybe it's my setups or the fixed setups. Another very interesting thing is the starting procedure, which is very intuitive. One thing that Le Mans Ultimate does really well that reminds me a little bit of the Formula 1 games when the games were good and a little bit better editions of them in other years. Even though those games were not the most realistic or had the best force feedback, one of the best things they did was to simulate or emulate the experience of being in a Formula 1 race, and Le Mans Ultimate does that very well for the Le Mans races, the World Endurance Championship or European Le Mans series, controlling the traction control slip angle and traction control cut in a realistic way, the same way the drivers need to worry about those things, and also the energy system. All those details are very interesting, and the way the game feels is very special because of that. It's very focused on making you relate to your real life experience. If you like these races and have watched them on TV or have been present to the racetrack in real life, then you will enjoy the experience that Le Mans Ultimate provides regarding the feeling of the race. At the same time, I think the force feedback being a little bit dull will hinder the experience for users that have a little bit of lower entry-level equipment compared to having a high-end direct drive, because on a higher-end direct drive I can feel stuff a lot better. I also experienced the same thing with Assetto Corsa Competizione. When I was playing Assetto Corsa Competizione on Logitech G923 or G29, it was very hard for me to feel many things about car behavior that I was able to unlock all those feelings only when I had a powerful Fanatec DD1 working with at least 15 to 20 Newton meters of peak force. But I'm not saying the force feedback is bad or anything like that, but it just feels a little bit closer to race room racing experience sometimes, or Assetto Corsa Competizione, even though it doesn't have so much exaggeration on the curbs, because Assetto Corsa does have a tendency to exaggerate curbs a little bit and to exaggerate the suspension going over height changes quite a lot on the steering wheel. It wants to make you feel everything so much. At the same time, there is something that's a little bit more unique to our Factor 2 and AMS 2, which is hard to describe with words because force feedback is a physical sensation, but there is a certain plasticity, certain smoothness and rubbery feeling, progressive feeling that you get in our Factor 2 and AMS 2, for example, and race room experience as well, where there is a certain weighty feeling to loading the steering wheel into either direction. And of course, the more progressive something feels and the more nuanced it feels, the less on and off effect you feel on it, and so sometimes it's harder to feel the same precision on the force feedback that you can feel, for example, on old Assetto Corsa or in AMS2 or even AMS1, to drive the car on the absolute limit of grip on the knife's edge all the time with complete confidence just right away as soon as you log for the first time into the game, and after 30 minutes you are on pace with the fastest drivers in there just by intuition. Here, the physics will require you to have a little bit more precision, and some inconsistencies can be heavily punished. Abusing the slip angle can be punishing on the tire temperatures and on your grip levels, and also the lap times. Another thing that I found a bit realistic is that there are no sound configurations for the cockpit sounds, meaning you cannot put your tires sounding way louder than everything else. So you will have to feel the car a little bit more carefully, and you need to be more on top of your driving technique and consistency to keep control of the car in the way you want it, to get it to turn in and do the lines and everything the way you want it. Sadly, I forgot to record sound on this footage, but on my next footage I'll have the sound turned on and you'll be able to hear the cockpit sound and everything, but the game does sound very good. I think the cockpit sound tends to be a little bit better than the outside sound, especially in the replays. Maybe they're trying to go for the TV camera sound and not the kind of sound that a spectator can hear. At the same time, on the LMP2 cars, for example, you can barely hear the tires, and it's very dangerous because those cars can lock up quite easily without ABS, and the pedal pressure also feels a little bit different. It works a little bit different. It seems they've been trying to emulate the physics of the brake pedal in a different way for every car. Well, for me personally, maybe because I already know this track well from other games and real life, it was very easy to keep the car in control and keep away from spinning, maybe because of the ABS and TC settings, which also made the car feel a little bit on the understeery side and on the planted side. Overall, it feels that I can get into the slidey territory if I lower the TC and lower the TC cut and everything like that, but at the same time I do miss a tiny bit of slip angle. Not that I'm a slip angle abuser, but I think that the tires overheating should happen when you are using a little bit more of slip angle. Here the tires do feel a tiny bit too sensitive on the temperatures, either when you're getting them up to pace and they are still cold, they seem to have almost no grip on the front. At the same time, when you slide a little bit, then the tires just get hot very quickly, and this seems a little bit more into the iRacing model than any other gaming model. The rear does tend to feel very planted, and something that you can see very easily in real life footage of racing cars is that many times in medium speed corners, for example, after entering a high speed corner or exiting a chicane with the camera to the front, or if you look closely in real life to the cars, the rear tires sometimes tend to be sliding and dancing a bit. You don't have the car with the four tires fully gripped all the time through a corner. It's very hard to get there. Usually it's nearly impossible, and sometimes it looks like it's not even the most optimal way to drive. You do need to drive the cars with a tiny little bit of slip angle here and there to make them go as quickly as possible, and that's very easily to catch on and to see happen either in real life or in real car footage. Just watch any race and watch close-ups on the cars, and you never have the four tires fully gripped on all corners throughout the track. That's just not realistic. Any driver driving a car to the limit will have moments where the car is a tiny little bit under the limit and maybe completely planted, but many times the cars will also go over the limit of grip and they will be sliding a bit here and there, and I think you do need to have some leeway to allow the cars to have this kind of sliding. I think in the old Assetto Corsa, with the best mods possible, in the best context possible, you can get very close, even though the tire model is not the most perfect and it's a little bit of a simplistic simulation. And depending on which content you are driving, sometimes it feels it is a little bit on the more lenient way, especially for the modern Pirelli tires, which are tires that feel way less progressive in their sliding compared to road cars or vintage cars. So in Assetto Corsa I noticed that certain vintage car mod packs are exceptionally good, maybe some of the best in the whole sim racing, and their tire model is very versatile for all sorts of levels of grip regarding the tires, and maybe even depending on how the car is modded, it can be very good for very high downforce cars like Formula 1 cars, but it tends to be a little bit on the more lenient side compared to most other sim racing games. And it is the same thing for Automobilista 2, to a little bit of a bigger extent. Some people will say that AMS 2 can be the most lenient sim racing game for the tire slip angles, and I think they've been curbing that down and also trying to make the force feedback a bit more precise, because it's easy to get into a gray area where you don't know if you are sliding too much or too little for the slip angle that a certain car requires. All this prologue to say that in Le Mans Ultimate you cannot abuse the slip angle as much. It will require from you a little bit more precise driving, and the racing line will be a little bit more important, and the way you modulate your inputs will have a bigger effect on how much grip you have in the fronts and how much you can turn the car. At the same time, the car will feel less nervous overall, and I do miss the cars feeling very nervous on the braking zones. Here the car feels a lot safer in the braking zone overall. It can still catch you off guard and you will end up losing time if you have to correct any big mistake. And in most cases, Le Mans Ultimate, to me, it feels like it tries to punish you for not having precise control over your inputs, and it tries to nudge you into a realistic input direction, because as we all know, especially in games, you can get away with certain things that would not be possible in real life, and especially with racing games, if a racing game has some sort of forgivingness or allowance for a certain behavior where it can give you a tiny bit of advantage, everyone will try to learn to exploit that to the fullest extent. So if a game allows to a little bit more of slip angle, then everyone will try to abuse that slip angle as much as possible, and here in Le Mans Ultimate it seems they are trying to fight those kinds of tendencies by being on a little bit more punishing side for any mistakes. But the punishment comes more in the lap time loss than actual big slides, like it can easily happen in the old Assetto Corsa or AMS 2, for example. I do kinda miss the cars feeling a little bit lively and nervous like they feel on old Assetto Corsa and Automobilista, AMS 2, but at the same time it's very hard to find that fine balance, and everyone will have different opinions and ideas about it. Still, I think the OG Assetto is and always will be a very strong benchmark, because up until now it is still very hard to beat the feeling of driving a car that it gives you, but it's a mix of so many things regarding the force feedback and the slip angle lenience and all those things that make you just feel so comfortable with it. I think we are spoiled in sim racing right now, and I'm very happy for it because I'm thankful that we have so many great sim racing titles with different takes and different approaches, and I think in Le Mans Ultimate, like so many other titles, driving comes naturally to me. This footage I've had on the background is from my second or third ever race in Le Mans Ultimate, already online and already testing and trying out stuff. ACC felt a little bit like the odd one out where my driving techniques didn't translate as well from every other sim racing game to it, but here, even though it's a little bit on a smoother side like ACC, the driving and racing techniques that I'm applying still seem to translate well. Something I almost forgot to mention is that the curbs here feel insanely nice. It's so well done, it's very nice to go over the curbs and the way the force feedback interacts with them. At the same time, you don't get those huge jolts of height changes that you can get in some other titles, so you can drive with some stability on top of the curbs, and I think that's a level of realism that's missing in some other simulators, where the curbs just compress the suspension way too hard. It's like the curbs are taller than they actually are in real life, and at the same time, not only that the curbs are that hard and punishing, and they unsettle the cars a little bit more than they should, they also feel way stronger than they should in the force feedback, even when you have details or effects set to 0 or something like that. Maybe that can feel nice on lower end entry level racing wheels, but even there you'll be losing detail and useful information about the curb behavior just to have too much info on the curbs, and I think it's a little bit of a bad sacrifice. In this area it feels to me like Le Mans Ultimate is doing it better than many other sims, because you can be confident on top of curbs, you can drive on the curbs, and it will not change the travel direction of your car very abruptly, it will not unsettle the car very hard, it will not change your force feedback feeling by quite a huge margin and change the way you are driving the car. So you will not be driving on the track trying to avoid curbs or anything like that, or seeing which curbs are safe and which curbs are not safe, because in some games, and many games actually, on many tracks, you'll have lots of curbs here and there. They could just affect your lap time a little bit, like some curbs do in Le Mans Ultimate, but many times what happens in many other simulation games is that the curbs will completely unsettle the car. You will go into a big spin, big slide, a big shunt, or you just have a huge understeer moment out of nowhere. It's like the curbs, instead of helping you, they hinder you and they actually damage the driving experience. And then I'm even left wondering, why do the tracks even have these curbs in these places? Because in many places the curb is there, the line should go through the curb, but the curb is obviously damaging the racing line, the lap time and the experience, and you will try to avoid it at all costs, so it shouldn't even be there. And I hope that the Le Mans Ultimate experience will force some other developers to fix their curbs in their games, the ones that will be released in the future and the ones that are still being updated and of course still being developed and changed. I hope that more curbs will feel like this in more racing games, because this is a good example of how to do it well. I think my biggest pet peeve with Le Mans Ultimate will be the business model regarding the online service game style, where you have an yearly subscription for the pro version of race control, but at the same time I kinda understand that you need to have that kind of thing going on if you are going to run professional dedicated servers. And this touches on another very important subject that I've been forgetting to mention throughout the whole video, which is the netcode. But yeah, with this level of attention to detail, I would love to see a few more car series, maybe some LMP3, some Ligier series for the rookies, at the same time a few more tracks. But of course, because this is based on a real life series, many tracks will not come here, at least from what it looks like to me. And of course everyone has their own personal favorite tracks, and some cars, for example a British Championship with the Praga R1 will will be so nice within this kind of game and this kind of physics, or something like racing GTs at Macau racetrack, or imagine picking up the LMDH cars and putting them at Mugello racetrack, for example. These are things that are hard to get in the whole sim racing, but here, kind of like Assetto Corsa Competizione, you get a very well thought out package, a very neat package, and a very focused approach that primes on having the right environment for professional competition and treating a motorsport game like an esport game, something where serious competition and respectful competition is the center of attention and the focus of the game. And so therefore you need very consistent quality across all the cars, across all the tracks, and it's understandable that you have a little bit more of a limited roster. And for all the other crazy experiments and maybe all the different things that are a little bit less realistic, but you might want to try them out, you have lots of other sims that will give you options to try those things out. I think that outside the daily races there are also the hosted races, meaning even if the live service model ever stopped, there will still be a peer-to-peer way of racing within this game, and that's something very healthy and very nice to have for racing games. And that's the final thing that helps me put the seal of approval on Le Mans Ultimate, is that the game is immortalized, because as long as people have copies of this game that they have bought and they own on their own Steam account, they should be always able to race with each other, at least hosting the races themselves. And I nearly missed it, but the netcode is really good. Here you can race very close to other cars, and somehow I'm not sure if it's because of the new special network settings that they use for this game, that I've only seen those settings in this game in particular, but you can race very close to other cars and there is no weird rubber banding and the cars going up and down in crazy weird ways. At least I have not yet noticed anything like that. When I look at the other cars on track, I see realistic movements and realistic positioning from the cars. It's not an approximation, or at least it doesn't look weird, like the cars are going always sideways or in some sort of weird angle of attack. Like some other games, sometimes the cars will look a bit strange, either on the replays or just racing online against some other guy that has a worse internet connection. Or in cases of racing side by side or having some door-to-door contact with some other cars, sometimes the cars become extremely unsettled, and even the suspension or the force feedback will display strange movements and unpredictable behavior. And here, for the most part, the behavior is a lot more predictable and a lot more stable, and you are able to race the cars very close, just the way you see it in real life and in the TV footage from these races. At least what I noticed with the GT3 cars was that you are able to race them very close to each other and still able to actually pull off some really decent and nice racing. Here, being close to other cars is not as scary as some other simulators, and I've been able to do half a lap or nearly an entire lap side by side with another car without having the cars randomly sliding into each other, or even having ghost contact where one of the car just spins the other without even ever touching, but just because of the netcode just displaying the cars not being together, but at the same time it's like the cars touched, even when both drivers would think that they had a safe distance from each other. All the camera adjustments are there to provide you a realistic point of view from the driver's eye, so everything here screams at simulating a European Le Mans Series race or a World Endurance Championship race in a realistic way, in a consistent way, and in a way where the focus is on the competition of the motorsport itself. There are not too many crazy things to fiddle around. You don't have infinite force feedback options, you don't have too many crazy things. I think some people can still edit the force feedback on a text file. These are all my first impressions just from my first day of playing this game, which was quite strong. I have to say that this game left a very strong first impression just from one day of racing in it and already starting to win races, but I know I'm still in the rookies, and so this part should be easy, and I should look at the consistencies and inconsistencies of the lap times and just focus on what the fastest guys are doing and learn to set up the cars here, which will be its own set of challenges, because the setups here, even though you have less things to mess about, the choices that you do with the setups do seem to have a stronger influence on the car's performance. And I do miss a time trial or test mode where you can just go there to practice a little bit alone on track or just with your own ghost and adjust the car settings, learn what which thing does to the setup of the car, and have a racing mode where there is no statistics for your profile, because this makes it feel a little bit more under pressure, where every single time you enter in a race, every little single thing you do will affect your driver profile, and so you will want to maximize your performance while minimizing your time on track. The replay system also seems to work very well, and it's very snappy. It's very easy to look through the footage and find the stuff that you might want to find in the middle of a race. You want to find a nice overtake or just an incident, and you'll be able to find those things quickly. And it's nice to have the driver statistics, the license, the ratings, everything here, and even if you want to report a driver, there is an option for that. I really enjoy the readability and the way the menus look and everything. I think that I've seen things looking a little bit more basic in some other games and with less animations, but where you see more information in one single screen, and I think people are moving slowly away from having a very industrial look to the UIs and trying to stylize the UIs in a little bit of a unique way without making it look too generic. I have to confess that I really enjoy my content manager experience from the original Assetto Corsa, because with that content manager thing, what happens is that it's very easy for me to have a lot of control and a lot of information in one single screen. And of course, sometimes there are some options hidden here and there, but if you have to click a lot to get anywhere and to get to some information or to change some configurations, then eventually it becomes boring. Doesn't matter how nice a screen is to look at. If the structure is very convoluted and complex, eventually you get tired of it. Here you have a very cool and nice balance, and whoever did this had some good experience designing these things, because this is a huge step up from rFactor 2. In rFactor 2 I found it nearly unplayable for me. rFactor 2 was very hard to navigate and to get stuff done. Even though rFactor 2 had mods and plugins capabilities, I still miss those things and the variety that they can bring to a game like Le Mans Ultimate. Le Mans Ultimate feels to me like a huge step up in every direction, in every way conceivable and possible, at least from my limited experience from what I remember when I was trying to play rFactor 2 quite a long time ago. And the online multiplayer was not very populated back then, and even then you were also just struggling to get everything running and to even understand which series you were selecting to race on and which setup to get, how to configure stuff. rFactor 2 still felt pretty nice on the physics and force feedback, just like Le Mans Ultimate. The bare bones, the backbone was there, but it just lacked the raw performance, the cleanliness of running everything without any bugs, any issues, and just the ability to load things faster, to get everything done faster, and also the readability in the menus, the organization, and making it a very nice, neatly packaged user experience, something like what you can find in Assetto Corsa Competizione or Automobilista 2, where everything is where it should be, everything is very intuitive. You don't need any instruction manual or anything too crazy. You don't need to go edit text files if you don't want to. There are no weird quirks and things that you need to fix by yourself and research on a Google search. You can just install the game, configure everything yourself alone by yourself, and you just go on the track and you just race, and that's it. And that's just a beautiful thing, just a nice experience where you just focus on the driving, which is the most important thing, and it's the reason for us all to be here doing this hobby. And of course, maybe remember and relive some real life experiences that we had when we were watching some of these races in real life. These motorsport series are quite famous across Europe and also some other parts of the world, and some of the replay camera tools are just so nice, they're so insane, you can make such cool looking replays. My only gripe with it is that it's a bit on the expensive side with the business model that we have for the Race Control Pro, and the car livery is being locked behind that, and also the DLC system where there is a certain trickling down of content with a little bit more aggressive side to the business model that you won't find on the majority of sim racing titles. Of course, they try to make it so that the quality speaks for itself, but for example on Assetto Corsa Competizione I believe we were getting a little bit more content for the same expenses, and we did not have a business model with an yearly subscription. And on games that are still being developed and updated like AMS 2 or Race Room Racing Experience, you do get a lot more content for a smaller price, and you also do not have the subscription model. Of course, the development pipelines might be completely different, and if it justifies the costs or not will be completely up to you, to your free time and where you want to spend it or not. I think it's very nice to have some healthy competition, and I hope that this video will give you some insight to have your own opinions about Le Mans Ultimate and what you think of it, if you're thinking about getting it or not, or you are on the fence. For me, it's not like something which I need to think a lot about, because if it's a good experience, of course I'll always want to try it. I've been a little bit more casually racing recently, and because of that I've been enjoying more when I have a whole package, like for example Le Mans Ultimate, Automobilista 2, Race Room Racing Experience. Even though I really like Assetto Corsa, sometimes to be competing on Assetto Corsa or even in AMS 2, if you are going to be competing, you need to spend time dialing in the setup, learning the track. In AC you have to configure lots of add-ons or mods or UI elements to optimize your performance and your racing experience to the best of your abilities, and sometimes you just want to casually sit in and just have a race, and sometimes it's very nice, and I am able to do that on a few simulators that come as a nice neatly packaged experience. And I really like when I have a simulator where, for example, many times it happens to me in AMS 2, where I just pick it up after a couple of months and I'm instantly on pace, provided that I know the car, I know the track, and I know the techniques that I want to apply. Sometimes there are some quirky behaviors here and there, but the overall experience, even though it feels totally different from Le Mans Ultimate, there is this thing where the knowledge that I have about the racing technique will allow me to be on pace very quickly as soon as I pick it up, and that's something that we all want and we all enjoy. I hope my video provided some useful information for you guys, and don't forget to like and subscribe and comment on the video. See you on the next one.